Nadal unfortunately just announced that he won't be playing in the 2024 Australian Open, which is just heartbreaking to the tennis community. After roughly a year of being out and missing nearly the entirety of the 2023 season after a hip injury he sustained at the Australian Open last year, which Nadal called his toughest season yet, he injured his hip again. Back in 2023, as many of you probably know, Nadal was coming off a pretty solid 2022 season at the age of 36. In 2022, he won the crazy 5-set comeback from 2 sets down against Medvedev to win his 21st slam. He also won his 22nd slam that year at the French Open against Ruud and overall just had a really good season. He ended up finishing with 4 titles and second in the ATP rankings, which was honestly a pretty big surprise considering that the prior year was a nightmare season for him, failing to win any Grand Slams and struggling with back pain in the early part of the season. Later on that season, his foot injury started to really take a hold of him, and after his loss during the French Open semifinal against Djokovic in 4 sets, things really started to look bad for him. He only played one more tournament that season, which was the Washington Open, and took a brutal loss to Lloyd Harris in the second round before he decided to end his season prematurely. At this point, things were honestly not looking great for him. He got surgery on his chronic foot injury called Müller-Weiss syndrome in September that year, and at age 35, people were expecting retirement to come pretty soon. Regardless of the situation, in 2022, he honestly did the unthinkable and won the Australian Open after coming back. This was probably one of the greatest tournament wins of his career and left tennis fans with even more questions regarding his health. Either way, 2023 almost mimicked 2021 in that he sustained a pretty bad injury, but this time to his hip. That would require him to wait until the next season to be able to play again. Some people were hoping that he would replicate the comeback that he had back in 2022, including myself, and at first it seemed like it might have been possible. I mean, in his first match against Dominic Thiem in the Brisbane Open, things were looking pretty good. Nadal only lost 6 points on his serve in the entire match and had a decisive break at 6-5 in the first set when Thiem made an unforced error that went long, helping him win the first set. The second set was even better, and he ended up winning the last 8 out of 9 games to finish the match 7-5, 6-1 against Thiem. And yeah, I know that Thiem is coming off of an injury himself and hasn't played at his best in a while, but you couldn't help but hope that Nadal was back in form. He took his next opponent, Kubler, down easily 6-1, 6-2 with 20 winners and 4 aces, and had this incredible no-look backhand smash that really got the crowd going. Now, to be honest, at this point I think most people, including myself, were convinced that Nadal was back to himself and a genuine contender for the Australian Open. That's until the quarterfinals when he took on Jordan Thompson and things started to look bad. The match actually started out solid for Nadal. He broke Thompson at 6-5 and took the first set and had match point 3 times in the second set, but couldn't get the job done. In set 3, he took a medical timeout for his left hip, which is the same one that he had surgery on last year, and ended up losing the match in the final set after being broken at 2-1. Now, this was honestly a pretty bad situation. He was having pain in the same hip that got surgery last year, and there were questions of whether he re-injured the same tendon, which could potentially mean a career retirement. I mean, going into 2024, Nadal said that this would likely be his last season, so this would just be a terrible way to end it. Luckily enough, through an MRI, his team was able to determine that it was a micro tear on one of his hip muscles rather than the psoas tendon in his hip. Now, this is definitely good news considering that he didn't exactly re-injure or re-tear the same tendon, but you can't help but wonder if they're connected in some way. If he hadn't had problems originally with his hip, would he have injured it in Brisbane? We don't know for sure, but I'm going to err on the side of probably not. And you can't help but wonder if a second injury to his hip is going to cause more problems for him down the line and maybe put him at a higher injury risk when he gets back. Nonetheless, Nadal said that he's out of the Australian Open and that he hopes to return for the clay season where he can hopefully win one last Grand Slam at the French Open, but it looks pretty improbable right now. At this point, I think any kind of title during the clay season would be a great way to finish off his career, and it's going to be a race between time and his health. What's sad though is that if Rafa really does retire this year, that would mean that he won't return to Australia again to play another tournament. But to be fair, with Rafa, you never really know what's going to happen. If he came back after a serious injury and won 2 Grand Slams, maybe he can do something like that again. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe for everything tennis related.